It was a situation from 3 years ago. I was on vacation to visit my brother and was staying in a rented house. I had a brother who normally needed help at different times, so I couldn't see him often. However, because he only had a one-bedroom apartment, I had to stay at his place every time. Once, I found a place very close to my brother's apartment. I was able to rent a house at the same price as hotels. I arrived in the city early in the morning and met with my brother. We bought something for lunch and returned to the rented apartment again in the evening. In the rented place, there was not much other than a bed and the sofa, but it was a convenient option to spend that night. I spent the time until 9 and then retreated to bed. I had had a long day and was looking forward to getting into bed and getting some rest. However, I stayed awake longer than I expected. About an hour later, when I was trying to sleep, I noticed that the room was dark. I couldn't check the time, but I heard something moving slowly outside the room. With the opening and closing of a door, silence prevailed. I felt like my whole body was frozen. After a while, when I realized that there was no movement, I got out of bed and looked into the hallway. From the far hallway, I could see the front door. I heard the door close, but I couldn't see anyone. Without noticing any traces or anything missing, I called 911. They came quickly, but they couldn't do much except say that the doors were locked. Finally, when he was sure that there was no sign in the house, no attempt or trace of him could be found that night, I decided to stay awake to look for solutions and waited until morning. When morning came, I contacted the rental landlord. This conversation kept me awake, and I thought about what happened and talked about it. While the landlord was out at the time, I went out to visit my brother. However, the landlord had unknowingly changed the password of the door, which made me uneasy. I immediately updated the password to correct the situation. I spent most of that day outside. I met my brother for dinner, and we had some drinks. I decamped back to the rented apartment between 8 and 9 o'clock at night. I was feeling sleepy while sitting on the couch, and when I tried to close my eyes, I started to feel a tension inside me. I was filled with anxiety about an uninvited visitor, knowing that I was sleep deprived last night. I came home again thinking that I definitely need to sleep tonight. I checked the rooms to relax. I walked around the living room and the kitchen, then made my way through the hallway to the bedroom. I checked the closet, and after checking the bathroom next door, I heard quick steps before going outside. I went down the hallway to the bedroom, and when I turned the corner, I saw a burly man closing the bedroom door. I heard footsteps moving away, and that's when I stood my ground and just listened. However, he felt like he had been walking around inside the house for about 2 minutes before he heard the sound of the front door opening and closing. When I called the police again, they came quickly, and this time the landlord also came to me. We noticed that furniture was scattered in the living room and kitchen, and the cabinets were open. Things were scattered on the floor, but the landlord could not see any decencies. It did not seem as if something was being searched. I left the rent at home and started staying in a hotel. A few days later, I did not receive any information about the incident. The visitor could not be found by any means, so his presence remained a secret. However, what impressed me was where that person was hiding and how much time he spent with me. Even though I controlled the house, maybe he was watching me. I don't know what would have happened if I had fallen asleep on the couch. While this situation remains in my mind with many question marks, it is difficult to forget that night. I am 27 years old and I live alone in a rural area. I have a few neighbors about half a mile away. Sometimes I chat with them, but usually I spend time on my own when I have to go to the city. I only do it when I need to. I'm retired, so I mostly spend time at home. However, during some periods, such as late autumn, I do work in the shed to prepare my equipment for winter. One day, while I was out, I saw a man tied up in my path. He had no backpack or camping equipment on him. This road was completely empty except for a few houses, and the man was a 4-hour walk from the town. I watched him until he disappeared to the end of the road. I looked in both directions and realized that I didn't see any cars on the side of the road, which was quite strange. However, after finishing my gardening chores, I returned home before dark. While I was preparing my dinner, I was suddenly startled by a loud noise coming from the table. It sounded like a crackling of wood. Looking out of the window into the courtyard, I saw that the door of the hut was open. The door was old and had not opened on its own before, which worried me. I decided to go out with my rifle for security purposes. I listened carefully to the surroundings, but heard nothing except silence. I looked around the field, and when I reached the door of the shed, I could see no signs of wildlife or people. I switched on my flashlight and made my way to the shed. Everything didn't look right inside. Although I made a detailed search, I could not find the hiding animals. As I closed the door of the shed and returned home, anxiety began to fill me. I did not know what to do to understand what had happened. There seemed to be a story behind the door, full of mystery inside. With eyes full of doubt, I took a step back with trembling hands. I gathered my courage by taking a deep breath. Silence for a moment. Then, the walls trembled with a sudden sound that broke that terrible silence. It was like seagulls making a loud scream, but it was in a much more chilling tone. My heart started beating fast. I felt almost suffocating as I stopped breathing. The strange events that followed one after the other were like a thriller, but it was real. The threat I was facing now was real. After a silence that suppressed the rumble, the silence that was ringing in my ears while my heart was speeding up as if it could suppress even its own beats, did not dissipate. A million question marks were flying in my head. What was I to do? Who was that? Why was he here? Every moment, with every breath, the tension was increasing. It was as if I was trapped in a gloomy story. I took a deep breath, slowly retraced my steps. I sincerely wished that this hair-raising incident I was experiencing would be resolved as soon as possible and return to normal. That night, between my loneliness in the darkness and unusual events, there were many question marks left behind. As I walked step by step towards my house, crazy questions were swirling in my mind. It was woven with a mystery. Every step, every breath, my heart was still beating fast. The tension of what I had experienced in the moment was still like a burden on my back. With a moment of solitude, I felt the silence created by unresolved questions, the uncertainties left behind. What was the truth behind these events? Who was this mysterious man, and what did he want? Perhaps this would remain a mystery in the corners of my mind once again. In the same darkness of the next night, sleepless, nervous, and with my heart still beating fast, I arrived at my house, restless and full of question marks. In the end, I still haven't understood the strange feeling that filled me, that I experienced that night. Maybe the real answers will never come to light. Maybe it will remain a mystery, and my unusual, creepy memories will stay with me for a while. Finally, I tried to sleep, but the mystery and tension of the events had sunk deep into my soul. I was 19 years old at the time, and we were in the early summer. I was at home because I was on school leave, and I had no plans. I used to spend most of my time playing video games, watching YouTube or television. I was home alone when my family was out, which was normal and usually wouldn't be a problem. Sometimes I would invite my friends, but I wanted to be alone tonight. They had been in the city for a few days, and I stayed at home by myself. In the evening, I was scrolling through my phone while watching a series one liked on Netflix. Suddenly, although I was not aware that it was late, there was a knock at the door. I turned off the TV and went to the door to see who it was. I didn't think the time was so late. When I looked through the peephole of the door, I saw two men dressed in similar outfits standing at the front door, carefully waiting for me to enter. Fortunately, I questioned who they were before opening the door. I hesitated for a moment between letting them know or not, and finally asked what they wanted. However, they remained silent and I just waited for them to leave, but after a few seconds, they said, "Hi, we want to talk to Mr." Their names were different. They seemed to be talking about my family, but I was confused because I changed the names. I thought it was too late for a visit, so I still kept quiet. After a while, the men looked at each other and went out in silence. The house lights were off, so I couldn't see where they were going. I didn't hear headlights or the sound of cars, which made me wonder if they were walking. The situation had become even stranger and this worried me, so I went in. I had gone to the TV and stopped for a moment, waiting in the silence so that I could hear them coming back. Several minutes passed until I heard a pair of footsteps outside the house. They made their way to the porch, but instead of knocking on the door, they headed towards the side of the house. When they got up and went to the backyard, I quickly ran to the back window, opened the fence and saw them come in. I moved away from the window to hide myself, but I could hear them moving towards the back door. I started talking and then they started banging on the door. I took the opportunity of this situation and chose to hide in the garage by taking my phone. I immediately called the police and reported a possible theft situation. At this moment, a loud noise came from inside the house. Then the back door slid open and footsteps made their way directly to the stairs leading to the bedrooms. They opened the door and entered, and then quietly closed the door, but from this point on, there was no sound again. I was in a state of fear and anxiety at that point. There was silence for about 10 minutes, and I heard quick footsteps upstairs before the police arrived. Then an argument started between two people. The police officers came in through the back door and quickly went upstairs, and another one came to the garage and helped me. The people outside did not resist, but they did not give any explanation as to why they were there. It was impossible to blame only because it was a clear sign that they had not come to rob the house. I didn't know what to do at that moment. It was a scary situation because they were giving the impression as if they were looking for my family. I got the feeling that I should have waited upstairs until they got home, but their behavior was telling me that they were going to break in and do anything to do what they wanted.